You ready to Before the world remembers him as a legend, Maximus is simply a man standing at the edge of death. In the frozen forests of Germania, the Roman Empire's greatest soldier walks through a landscape where beauty and brutality exist side by side. The air is heavy with smoke, the ground is buried beneath mud, and thousands of men prepare to destroy each other for the glory of an empire. Yet amid this chaos, the film gives us an image that feels impossible to forget, a weathered hand slowly moving through a field of golden wheat. The contrast is immediate. The wheat represents peace, home, and a life beyond war. The battlefield represents everything taken from Maximus. In one visual idea, Gladiator reveals the tragedy at the heart of its hero. He is not a warrior searching for conquest. He is a man fighting because he wants to return to the quiet moments that war has stolen from him. What makes this opening remarkable is that Gladiator arrived when Hollywood had almost completely abandoned this kind of story. The grand sword and sandal epics that once defined cinema had faded after expensive failures and changing audience tastes. Since the disaster surrounding Cleopatra in 1963, studios viewed ancient historical adventures as financial dangers rather than opportunities. The age of massive Roman armies and heroic warriors seemed like a forgotten chapter of filmmaking. Then came a movie that appeared to have every reason to fail. It was expensive, ambitious, and built around a genre many believed audiences no longer wanted. Even more surprising, its screenplay was still evolving during production. The story was not a perfect blueprint waiting to be filmed. It was a creative risk shaped by collaboration, instinct, and the belief that powerful characters could overcome uncertainty. At the center of that gamble were two unforgettable performances. Russell Crowe brought Maximus' strength and vulnerability, creating a warrior whose greatest battle is against the loss of everything he loves. Across from him, Joaquin Phoenix transformed Commodus into something more disturbing than a simple villain. His insecurity, desperation, and hunger for approval created a character who could seem fragile one moment and terrifying the next. Their conflict gives Gladiator its emotional engine. It is not only a story about an empire, it is about power, identity, revenge, and the emptiness that comes when someone believes the world owes them respect. The mystery surrounding Gladiator was how a film built on an outdated genre, an unfinished script, and uncertainty could become a defining cinematic achievement. How did a story about a fallen general, a corrupt emperor, and an ancient world connect with modern audiences? The answer lies between the Colosseum's roar and a man remembering what he lost. Gladiator was never only about Rome, it was about humanity's oldest struggles, honor against ambition, memory against destruction, and the search for meaning when all is lost. The story of Gladiator is almost as fascinating behind the camera as it is on the screen. What audiences eventually saw as a carefully crafted historical epic was actually born from uncertainty, constant adjustments, and creative battles. The film that became a symbol of cinematic confidence was created through a process filled with questions. What should this story truly be about? How can an ancient world feel emotionally alive? And how do you build a timeless character when the foundation itself is still changing? One of the most revealing examples of that struggle came from Russell Crowe's experience during production. The script was still developing, and many scenes lacked the polished dialogue normally expected from a major studio film. Crowe famously pushed back against lines he felt did not work, challenging the material because he understood that Maximus could not survive as a character built only on dramatic speeches. The performance required something deeper, a sense of a man carrying grief, anger, and responsibility beneath every word. That creative tension became part of what shaped Gladiator's identity. The film's power did not come from perfection on the page. It came from filmmakers and actors searching for emotional truth within an uncertain process. This deep dive explores how that search transformed into one of the most influential films of its era. We will examine the structure that allows Gladiator to function not only as an epic adventure but also as a tragedy, following the classical rise and fall of a hero whose personal loss becomes a battle for something larger than himself. The journey will also move into the psychology of its characters, especially the devastating contrast between Maximus and Commodus. One represents discipline, loyalty, and acceptance of duty. The other represents insecurity, obsession, and the desperate need to be loved by a world that he believes has rejected him. Their rivalry is powerful because it is not simply good versus evil. It is a collision between two completely different ideas of what gives a person value. Beyond the characters, every element of Gladiator's filmmaking will reveal another layer of meaning. The visual symbolism of dirt, blood, sunlight, and architecture will show how the film communicates emotions without dialogue. The sound design will demonstrate how every sword strike, crowd reaction, and moment of silence builds tension. And Hans Zimmer's haunting score will be explored as more than background music, a voice for memories, loss, and the longing for a home that can never truly be recovered. Looking back at Gladiator today also reveals something important about modern blockbuster filmmaking. In an era where many large-scale productions rely heavily on digital spectacle, Gladiator remains powerful because its greatest effects are emotional. The armies, arenas, and ancient cities create scale, but the audience remembers the human story beneath them. The film's legacy is not built only on what it showed us, but on what it made us feel. By returning to its creation, structure, and themes, we uncover why a movie set thousands of years in the past still speaks directly to the fears, hopes, and struggles of the present. For many viewers, Gladiator is not simply a movie they watched, it is a memory. It is the feeling of seeing the Colosseum for the first time, hearing thousands of voices rise together, and watching a man with nothing left except his name and his purpose step into the arena. The film arrived at a moment when audiences were hungry for larger-than-life stories. But what made it unforgettable was that beneath all the spectacle was an emotion everyone understood. The pain of losing the life you wanted and finding the strength to continue anyway. Maximus became more than a fictional Roman general. Over time, he evolved into a modern symbol of endurance. He is remembered not because he is unbeatable, but because he suffers. His power comes from restraint, from the way he carries grief, without allowing it to completely destroy him. In a culture filled with heroes who gain strength through victory, Maximus became memorable because his greatest battle was surviving what had already been taken from him. This is why moments like "Are you not entertained?" escaped the boundaries of the film itself. The line became a piece of popular culture, repeated in conversations, memes, and countless references beyond cinema. On the surface, it represents a warrior challenging the crowd. But underneath, it captures something much more complicated. A man forced to turn his suffering into a performance for people who only care about violence and entertainment. That idea connected deeply with audiences because Gladiator understood a timeless frustration. The feeling of being ignored, underestimated, or forced to prove your worth in front of others is not limited to ancient Rome. The arena simply becomes a larger version of a struggle people recognize in their own lives. What makes returning to Gladiator years later so rewarding is discovering how much was hidden beneath the obvious moments. As younger viewers, many people experienced it as a revenge story, filled with battles, swords, and unforgettable speeches. But with time, different details begin to stand out. The silence before Maximus fights, the way he looks at memories of his family, the small changes in Commodus's behavior when he realizes he cannot earn the respect he desperately wants. The film's emotional weight comes from these quiet moments as much as its famous scenes. It understands that a person can win every battle and still lose the life they were fighting for. This is why Gladiator continues to find new audiences decades after its release. It is not only a historical epic or an action film, it is a story about identity, loss, and the search for meaning after tragedy. The armor, the swords, and the empire create the world around the characters. But the reason people continue returning is much simpler. They see themselves in a man who has lost everything and still chooses to stand. Before Gladiator became a landmark in modern cinema, it began with a single image hanging in a producer's mind. The spark came from John Leon Jerome's 1872 painting Police Verso, a dramatic vision of ancient Rome where a wounded gladiator lies in the arena while a bloodthirsty crowd demands his fate. The painting captured everything that would later define the film: the cruelty of public spectacle, the relationship between power and entertainment, and the fragile line between life and death beneath the shadow of an empire. Producer Douglas Wick saw something more than a historical painting. He saw a story waiting to be rediscovered. The image suggested a world that Hollywood had abandoned, but one that still carried enormous emotional potential. Together with screenwriter David Franzoni, Wick developed the foundation of a Roman epic centered around a warrior forced into slavery and transformed by loss. The concept eventually reached director Ridley Scott, whose reputation for creating immersive worlds made him the ideal filmmaker to bring ancient Rome back to life.
Scott had already demonstrated an extraordinary ability to create believable environments, from the futuristic nightmare of Alien to the atmospheric landscapes of Blade Runner. But Gladiator presented a different challenge. This was not simply about designing a convincing past. It was about making audiences believe that a civilization thousands of years removed from their own still had something urgent to say. The biggest obstacle was that the story itself was still searching for its final shape. Unlike many major studio productions built on a completed screenplay, Gladiator entered production with enormous uncertainty. Filming began with only a small portion of the script fully developed, with reports indicating that roughly 32 pages were locked at the beginning of shooting. The filmmakers had the destination, but many roads leading there were still being created. That uncertainty created constant pressure. Characters, dialogue, and story elements continued evolving as production moved forward. Screenwriter David Franzoni established the original foundation, but William Nicholson was brought in to reshape and deepen the emotional aspects of the story. The focus gradually shifted beyond revenge and spectacle, creating a more personal tragedy centered on a man dealing with grief, identity, and the loss of his former life. For Ridley Scott, the incomplete script became a challenge rather than a limitation. Instead of relying only on dialogue to explain the world, he leaned heavily into visual storytelling. He understood that cinema could communicate through architecture, movement, texture, and atmosphere. A Roman hallway, a battlefield covered in smoke, or a silent moment inside the arena could reveal emotions that words could not fully express. This approach became essential because Scott's vision for Rome depended on making the audience feel physically present inside the empire. The production built massive practical sets in Malta, creating streets, temples, and sections of the ancient world that actors could actually walk through and interact with. These physical environments gave the film a sense of weight and authenticity. At the same time, Gladiator arrived during a period when digital filmmaking was rapidly changing. Scott combined traditional craftsmanship with early digital techniques, extending physical sets through computer-generated environments. The result was a world that felt larger than what could realistically be built while still maintaining the texture and realism of practical filmmaking. The production's challenges became even more painful when tragedy struck. Oliver Reed, who played the beloved Gladiator trainer Proximo, passed away during filming. Reed's death left the production facing an impossible question. How could the film complete one of its most important supporting characters while honoring the performance he had already created? The solution required innovative filmmaking techniques that were groundbreaking at the time. Using existing footage, careful editing, and early digital visual effects, the filmmakers were able to complete Proximo's remaining moments. A digital body double was created using available material, allowing Reed's presence to remain part of the final film. Rather than replacing the actor, the technology was used as a way to preserve his contribution and give his character a proper conclusion. This moment represented the larger philosophy behind Gladiator's creation. The film constantly existed between the old and the new. It was a traditional epic built around practical sets, real costumes, and physical performances, but it also embraced emerging digital tools that expanded what filmmakers could achieve. The result was a production defined by uncertainty but guided by a clear artistic vision. Ridley Scott did not build Rome through technology alone. He built it through detail, atmosphere, and the belief that audiences would connect with the people living inside that world. Gladiator's journey from a single 19th-century painting to a massive cinematic experience was anything but simple. It was a film created through risk, adaptation, and problem-solving, a project where every challenge forced the filmmakers to discover a stronger version of the story they were trying to tell. As Gladiator moved toward release in 2000, it entered a Hollywood landscape that seemed determined to leave films like it behind. The era of massive historical epics had faded. The sweeping productions that once dominated theaters with armies, kingdoms, and larger-than-life heroes had become associated with an older generation of filmmaking. Audiences had moved toward faster, more modern stories driven by technology, conspiracy, and uncertainty. The late 1990s were defined by a different cinematic identity. Hollywood was entering the digital age, experimenting with new visual effects and embracing stories that reflected a more skeptical, futuristic world. Films built around paranoia, psychological tension, and technological change captured the cultural mood. Against this backdrop, a serious Roman drama with sword fights, political corruption, and ancient warfare appeared almost like a forgotten relic returning from another era. To many industry observers, Gladiator seemed like a dangerous gamble. The film carried a production budget of around $103 million, a massive investment for a mature historical drama aimed at adult audiences. Unlike superhero franchises or established properties with built-in fan bases, Gladiator had to convince viewers that a story set in ancient Rome was still relevant. The risk became even greater because the film was rated R. This meant the studio was not chasing the widest possible audience by creating a family-friendly adventure. Instead, Gladiator was positioned as a violent, dramatic epic filled with themes of revenge, political betrayal, and death. For a studio investing over $100 million, that combination created understandable anxiety. Universal and DreamWorks faced the challenge of selling something that Hollywood had largely stopped believing in. How do you market a film about a Roman general when audiences have already decided that ancient world stories belong to the past? The answer was to focus first on the element audiences could immediately understand: the arena. The marketing campaign emphasized the scale and brutality of the Colosseum. Trailers highlighted massive battles, roaring crowds, and Maximus standing against impossible odds. The imagery was designed to communicate that this was not a slow historical drama filled only with political conversations. It was a cinematic event filled with action, danger, and spectacle. But beneath the violence was a more emotional story, and that became the film's greatest advantage. The trailers introduced audiences to Maximus not simply as a fighter, but as a man searching for justice after losing everything. The promise was not only that viewers would witness battles, it was that they would understand why those battles mattered. Still, before release, uncertainty surrounded the film's biggest creative decision, Russell Crowe as its leading man. At the time, Crowe was respected as a serious actor, especially after his acclaimed performance in LA Confidential and other dramatic roles. However, some questioned whether he could carry the weight of a $100 million studio production built around a heroic character. The traditional Hollywood model often favored established movie stars who could guarantee audience interest before a film even opened. Crowe did not yet represent that kind of global box office certainty. Could an actor known primarily for intense dramatic performances become the face of a massive historical blockbuster? The doubts reflected a larger uncertainty about the entire project. Gladiator was attempting something Hollywood had moved away from. It was not following the trends of the moment. It was not built around a familiar franchise. It was not designed as a quick, disposable experience. Instead, it was a film asking audiences to care about honor, sacrifice, and a world that existed nearly 2,000 years earlier. The strange thing about Gladiator's journey was that the very qualities considered weaknesses before release would eventually become its greatest strengths. Its seriousness, its emotional focus, and its commitment to character separated it from the surrounding landscape. What began as a risky attempt to revive a forgotten genre was quietly becoming something much larger. The industry expected a gamble. Audiences were about to discover a phenomenon. The first moments of Gladiator do not introduce Rome as an untouchable symbol of greatness. Instead, they introduce an empire exhausted by its own expansion. In the cold forests of Germania, where the landscape is buried beneath smoke, mud, and ash, Rome's power is not presented as a glorious achievement but as a machine that demands endless sacrifice. General Maximus Decimus Meridius stands at the center of this world. Before he becomes a symbol of revenge or a legendary figure in the arena, he is a soldier carrying the weight of command. He walks through the battlefield not like a man chasing glory, but like someone who understands exactly what war costs. His armor is covered in dirt, his face shows exhaustion, and his focus remains on one thing: ending the conflict and returning home. The battle itself immediately establishes the tone of Gladiator. This is not a polished fantasy version of ancient warfare where heroes move effortlessly through combat. The forest is chaotic and terrifying. Arrows disappear into smoke. Soldiers collide in confusion. Fire spreads through the trees. The environment feels unstable, reflecting the reality of a world where victory comes through survival rather than elegance. Ridley Scott uses this opening battle to reveal Maximus's character without relying on long explanations. His leadership comes from action. He understands strategy, but he also understands the men fighting beside him. He is not separated from his soldiers by arrogance or distance. He stands among them, sharing the same danger and believing that their lives matter. This connection explains why Maximus commands such loyalty. His authority is not built only on rank. It comes from trust. The soldiers follow him because they believe he is fighting for something beyond personal ambition. Yet the most important detail about Maximus is that he does not belong entirely to the battlefield. Behind the armor is a man who dreams of peace. His thoughts are not consumed by conquest or political power. They return repeatedly to his home in Hispania, his wife, his son, and the simple life waiting beyond the reach of Rome's wars. This creates the central contrast of his character. Maximus is one of the empire's greatest warriors, but his greatest desire is to stop being one. He has mastered the art of destruction while longing for a life built around creation. Opposite this personal desire stands Emperor Marcus Aurelius, a ruler who has spent decades carrying the responsibility of Rome. Unlike many emperors remembered for excess and ambition, Marcus is portrayed as a philosopher trapped inside the demands of power. He is a man who achieved everything the world could offer, yet still feels the burden of what Rome has become. His relationship with the empire is complicated. He loves Rome, but he recognizes its weaknesses. The empire has expanded through military strength, but beneath that power are political problems and moral compromises. Marcus does not simply want Rome to continue growing. He wants Rome to become something better. This is why his relationship with Maximus becomes so significant. Marcus sees in him qualities that Rome desperately needs: discipline, humility, loyalty, and a sense of duty without hunger for personal power. Maximus represents the kind of leadership Marcus believes can guide the empire towards stability. The contrast becomes even clearer when the imperial family is introduced. Commodus, Marcus Aurelius's son, represents everything the emperor fears. He is not a warrior shaped by responsibility. He is a man consumed by insecurity and desperate for approval. His desire for his father's love reveals a deep emotional wound, but that wound has transformed into entitlement and obsession. Lucilla, Commodus's sister, exists between these two worlds. She understands the dangers surrounding her family and the political instability beneath the surface of Rome's greatness. Her relationship with both Marcus and Commodus reveals the complicated reality of imperial power. Family bonds and political survival are constantly intertwined. At the height of Rome's power, the empire is already facing a hidden crisis. The external enemies may be standing beyond its borders, but the greater threat exists inside the palace. This tension reaches its turning point when Marcus Aurelius reveals his final decision. He does not choose Commodus as his successor. Instead, he entrusts Maximus with a responsibility that could reshape history, help restore Rome as a republic and return power to the people. The decision is devastating because it exposes the deepest conflict within Gladiator. Maximus has spent his life avoiding political ambition, yet he is suddenly placed at the center of Rome's future. Commodus has spent his entire life seeking power, yet the one thing he wants most is denied to him. In this moment, the battlefields of Germania become only the beginning. The real conflict is no longer between Rome and its enemies. It is between two visions of power, one built on service, and one built on the desperate need to be worshipped. The tragedy of Gladiator begins not with a battle, but with a moment of silence between a father and a son. When Marcus Aurelius reveals that he does not see Commodus as the future of Rome, he does more than deny him a throne. He confirms the deepest fear Commodus has carried his entire life, that despite everything he has done, despite his desperate need for approval, his father still does not believe he is worthy. For Commodus, this rejection is not a political defeat. It is a personal destruction. His entire identity has been built around the hope that one day Marcus Aurelius would look at him with pride. The emperor's decision to choose Maximus is painful because Maximus represents everything Commodus believes he lacks: discipline, respect, strength. The qualities that come naturally to Maximus are the very things Commodus has spent his life trying to imitate. In that moment, the desire for his father's love transforms into something much darker. The murder of Marcus Aurelius is one of the most disturbing scenes in Gladiator because it is not presented as an act of pure ambition. It is an emotional collapse. Commodus does not kill his father like a victorious conqueror claiming power. He kills him like a wounded child who cannot accept being rejected. The physical nature of the murder reflects their broken relationship. There is no grand speech, no dramatic public betrayal. Instead, Commodus embraces his father and suffocates him in a private moment. The act is horrifying because it combines affection and violence. The same person who desperately wanted his father's approval becomes the person responsible for destroying him. This contradiction defines Commodus. He is not simply evil because he wants power. He is dangerous because his emotional wounds have become inseparable from his ambition. Every decision he makes afterward is shaped by the belief that the world has denied him the love and respect he deserves. Once Marcus Aurelius is dead, Commodus moves quickly to eliminate the final obstacle between himself and absolute control. Maximus becomes a threat not because he wants the throne, but because his very existence exposes Commodus's weakness. As long as Maximus lives, there is someone who represents the leadership Rome could have had. The order for Maximus's execution is not only political. It is personal. When the Praetorian guards arrive, Maximus understands that loyalty has become a weakness. The empire he served without question has turned against him. The soldiers who once represented Rome's authority now represent betrayal. His escape through the snowy landscape becomes one of the film's most important transformations. Until this point, Maximus has been a commander who controls chaos. He gives orders, creates strategies, and leads others through danger. Now he is completely powerless. Injured, hunted, and alone, he is no longer the general of Rome's armies. He is simply a man trying to reach the only place that still represents meaning. His desperate journey home carries a different kind of intensity than the opening battle. There is no army behind him. No soldiers waiting for his command. No victory to achieve. Every step is driven by one simple hope, that his family is still alive. The journey becomes painful because the audience understands what Maximus does not yet know. The dream of returning home has already been destroyed. When he finally reaches his farm, Gladiator delivers one of its most devastating emotional blows. The place that represented peace and freedom has become a symbol of everything taken from him. His wife and son are gone. The home he fought to return to exists only as a reminder of his failure to protect them. The tragedy is not only that Maximus loses his family. It is that he believes he personally failed them. His entire identity was built around being a protector. A husband. A father. A leader. When those roles are taken away, he is left with nothing except grief. The film does not rush through this moment. Maximus's pain is quiet and overwhelming. He is not immediately transformed into a revenge-driven hero. He collapses because there is no reason left for him to stand. This is the true beginning of his journey. Eventually, broken and barely alive, Maximus is discovered by slave traders. The man who once commanded thousands of soldiers is reduced to property. The general of Rome becomes a nameless captive, separated from his past and stripped of his identity. Yet this loss creates the foundation for his rebirth. The journey into slavery forces Maximus into a world where rank means nothing and survival depends on something deeper than authority. When he is taken to Zuccobar, he crosses into a completely different existence. The battlefield of Germania, the halls of imperial Rome, and the peaceful fields of Hispania are now distant memories. The world he knew has disappeared. But beneath the chains, beneath the exhaustion, and beneath the grief, something remains. The same determination that made him a great commander is still alive. He has lost his home, his family, and his position, but he has not yet lost himself. And in a place designed to erase human dignity, Maximus begins the impossible task of discovering what remains when everything else has been taken away. The man who once commanded Rome's greatest armies now finds himself in a world where names, titles, and achievements mean nothing. In the brutal markets of slavery, Maximus is no longer General Maximus Decimus Meridius. To those around him, he is simply another broken man waiting to be sold. But even in defeat, something about him separates him from everyone else. When Antonius Proximo enters his life, he does not see just another prisoner. Proximo, a former gladiator who survived the arena and built a new life as a lanista, recognizes a quality that cannot be easily destroyed. He sees the discipline of a soldier, the controlled anger of a warrior, and the presence of someone who has not truly surrendered. Played by Oliver Reed, Proximo brings a completely different energy into Maximus's journey. He is not an idealistic mentor who believes the world is fair. He understands exactly what the arena represents. A place where human beings are reduced to entertainment, where survival depends on violence, and where freedom is often just another promise used to control people. Yet Proximo also understands power. He knows that even inside a system built on cruelty, a person can create influence. The arena is not only a place of death. It is a stage where reputation can become a weapon. Alongside Proximo, Maximus meets Juba, a fellow gladiator whose worldview provides an emotional contrast. Juba has also lost his freedom, but unlike Maximus, he holds on to the belief that something exists beyond suffering. His spirituality and acceptance of fate create a quiet connection between the two men. While Maximus is trapped by memories of what he has lost, Juba reminds him that life cannot only exist in the past. The transition from Roman general to gladiator is one of the most important transformations in the film. Maximus does not willingly embrace his new identity. He does not dream of becoming famous in the arena. He refuses to fight because, emotionally, he has already given up. His body survives, but his spirit remains trapped with his family and the life that was destroyed. The arena forces him to confront a painful reality: survival requires participation. At first, Maximus fights only because he has no other choice. But the audience quickly sees that his experience as a military commander has prepared him for this world in ways even he does not realize. While other gladiators rely on individual strength or aggression, Maximus approaches combat like a battlefield. He studies opponents. He understands formations. He sees patterns before others recognize them. The result is that he transforms the arena into something completely unexpected. What appears to be a group of enslaved fighters thrown into chaos becomes, under Maximus's leadership, a disciplined military unit. He does not fight like a performer seeking attention. He fights like a commander trying to survive. This difference is what creates the legend of the Spaniard. The name spreads because audiences inside the film recognize something unusual. They are not watching a normal gladiator. They are watching someone who carries himself with a confidence that cannot be explained by his circumstances. The mystery surrounding him becomes part of his power. For Maximus, however, the attention means very little. The cheers of the crowd cannot replace his family. Victory cannot erase his pain. Every fight is another reminder that he is still trapped in a world he never chose. This is where Proximo's philosophy becomes crucial. He understands that the gladiator's greatest weapon is not the sword. It is the audience. In the arena, the crowd has power because their approval determines who becomes valuable. A forgotten slave can become a symbol if enough people believe in him. Proximo teaches Maximus that winning battles is not enough. To survive, he must win the crowd. This idea changes the meaning of the arena. The gladiator fights not only against opponents but against invisibility. The crowd decides whether a man is remembered or discarded. Fame becomes a form of protection. Maximus initially rejects this reality because he sees himself as a soldier, not an entertainer. But slowly, his actions begin to affect those watching. The same qualities that made him a respected general, courage, leadership, and control under pressure, now make him extraordinary in the arena. Meanwhile, Rome itself begins changing under Commodus's rule. Seeking public approval and attempting to secure his position, the new emperor announces 15 days of games honoring his late father. The celebration is meant to display his generosity and connect him with the people of Rome. But beneath the spectacle is insecurity. Commodus understands that power cannot survive through fear alone. He needs admiration. He needs the crowd to believe in him, just as he always needed his father's approval. The Colosseum becomes the perfect stage for this performance. For Proximo's troupe, the announcement represents an opportunity. Rome offers the largest arena, the biggest audience, and the possibility of greater fame. The journey toward the Colosseum begins, carrying Maximus closer to the empire he once served and the man responsible for destroying his life. The general who disappeared into slavery is slowly becoming a legend. But the closer he gets to Rome, the harder it becomes to escape the past waiting for him there. The return to Rome marks a turning point not only in Maximus's journey but in the balance of power throughout the empire. The man who left Rome as a respected general returns as a slave, standing beneath the shadow of the very civilization he once defended. Yet the irony is that Rome no longer recognizes him by his title. It only sees what he has become inside the arena. The Colosseum becomes the place where Maximus's old life and new identity collide. For the citizens of Rome, the arena is entertainment. It is a place where history is transformed into spectacle, where emperors can control public emotion through carefully designed displays of violence. Commodus understands this better than anyone. He does not simply want to rule Rome, he wants to be loved by Rome. The games are not only celebrations. They are political performances. To honor his late father, Commodus presents a reenactment of the Battle of Carthage, turning a historical conflict into a theatrical event. The purpose is obvious: to remind the people of Rome's greatness while positioning himself as the rightful heir of that legacy. But the problem with controlling a performance is that sometimes the performers create a different story. The gladiators enter the arena facing what appears to be an impossible challenge. They are heavily outmatched, surrounded by enemies equipped with armor, weapons, and military organization. The battle has been designed to recreate the power of Rome's armies, with the gladiators serving as disposable victims meant to provide a dramatic victory for the spectacle. But Maximus sees the situation differently. The same instincts that made him successful on the battlefield return instantly. While others see chaos, he sees strategy. While others see themselves as individual fighters, he sees a unit. The arena may be built for entertainment, but Maximus approaches it like a commander defending his soldiers. He gathers the gladiators together, creating order where the event was designed to create panic. The group that was expected to die becomes something far more dangerous, a coordinated force. This sequence reveals one of Gladiator's central ideas. True leadership does not disappear when circumstances change. Maximus may have lost his armor, his army, and his position, but the qualities that made him a great general remain untouched. The result is a battle that transforms the mood of the Colosseum. The crowd does not see slaves fighting for survival. They see courage. They see defiance. They see something authentic in a world built on manufactured entertainment. The victory becomes more than a successful fight. It becomes the moment Maximus begins taking control of the story being written about him. And then comes the moment that changes everything. After the battle, the mysterious gladiator who has captured Rome's attention finally reveals who he truly is. Standing before the emperor, surrounded by thousands of spectators, Maximus removes the mask that has protected him and declares his identity. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius. The power of this moment comes from the contrast between the quiet man who entered the arena and the legendary figure he once was. The crowd thought they were watching an extraordinary gladiator. They discovered they had been watching a Roman general. But for Commodus, this revelation is far more devastating. The arena was supposed to be his stage. The games were designed to reinforce his image as the beloved emperor who brought entertainment and prosperity to Rome. Instead, the crowd's attention shifts toward the one man Commodus cannot control. Maximus becomes everything Commodus fears. He is respected without asking for respect. He inspires loyalty without demanding obedience. He has the admiration that Commodus has spent his entire life trying to force from others. The emperor faces an impossible choice. Publicly executing Maximus would satisfy his personal hatred, but it would anger the people who had become fascinated by the gladiator. The crowd has already chosen their hero. In one of the film's most revealing political moments, Commodus is forced to give Maximus a gesture of approval. The emperor raises his thumb, but the decision is not an act of mercy. It is an act of surrender. For the first time, Commodus discovers that being emperor does not mean having complete control. The people's love has become a force stronger than his authority. This moment also begins a new phase of the conflict. Maximus is no longer simply fighting for survival. His existence has become a political threat. His popularity creates an alternative source of power, one built not through inheritance but through respect. Behind the scenes, others recognize the opportunity created by Maximus's return. Lucilla, who understands her brother's instability better than anyone, begins searching for a way to prevent Rome from falling further into corruption. Senator Gracchus, a defender of the old republican ideals, also sees Maximus as a possible symbol of resistance. Their alliance with him is dangerous because it challenges Commodus's control from within his own empire. Yet Maximus remains focused on a single purpose. He does not desire political influence. He does not want the attention of Rome. Every victory, every cheer, and every moment of fame leads back to the same personal wound. He wants justice. The irony is that the man who wants nothing to do with power has become powerful enough to threaten the person who controls the world around him. The arena was built to entertain Rome, but Maximus has turned it into the place where the emperor's greatest weakness is revealed. By the final act of Gladiator, Maximus has become something Commodus can no longer ignore. The emperor has spent his entire reign trying to control perception, convincing Rome that he represents strength, stability, and greatness. But the existence of one man threatens that carefully constructed image. Maximus does not need a throne to challenge Commodus. He does not need an army or political title. His very presence exposes the difference between true leadership and borrowed power. The people admire him because he represents something Commodus can never manufacture, respect earned through sacrifice. But admiration alone cannot defeat an empire. The plan to escape Rome reveals the fragile hope surrounding Maximus's final chance at freedom. With help from Lucilla and Senator Gracchus, a possibility emerges to remove Commodus from power and restore a different future for Rome. For the first time since losing his family, Maximus has a purpose beyond revenge. His actions could create change that reaches beyond his own suffering. But the plan fails because Commodus's paranoia is stronger than anyone expects. The emperor has spent his life fearing betrayal, and that fear has made him extremely dangerous. When the Praetorian Guard moves against the conspirators, the dream of escape collapses instantly. The political battle that seemed possible disappears beneath the reality of imperial control. For Maximus, the loss is another reminder that Rome is a world built on violence and deception. He has survived battlefields, slavery, and the arena, but the forces surrounding him continue to take away every opportunity for peace. The consequences are devastating. Proximo, who once taught Maximus how to survive the arena, becomes one of the final people willing to stand against the system that created them both. His relationship with Maximus has changed from a business arrangement into genuine respect. He recognizes that this former general is fighting for something larger than himself. Proximo's sacrifice is powerful because it represents a man who once accepted the cruelty of the world, choosing, at the end of his life, to resist it. The arena owner who profited from violence ultimately gives his life trying to protect someone who represents hope. His death reinforces one of the film's strongest themes: freedom is not achieved without cost. Meanwhile, Commodus prepares the final confrontation in the only place where he believes he can control the outcome, the arena. The decision to fight Maximus publicly appears to be an act of courage, but the reality reveals Commodus's true character. Even at the moment when he wants to appear heroic, he cannot accept a fair challenge. Before entering the Colosseum, he secretly stabs Maximus, weakening him before the fight begins. This act is not only physically cruel. It is symbolic. Commodus cannot defeat Maximus as an equal because he knows they are not equals. One man has earned admiration through suffering. The other has inherited authority without earning trust. The hidden attack exposes the insecurity beneath the emperor's image. The final duel takes place on white sand beneath the overwhelming attention of Rome. The arena that once represented Maximus's humiliation now becomes the place where his final purpose is fulfilled. Visually, the scene feels almost removed from reality. The bright sand, the silence between moments of violence, and the exhausted movements of the two men create a sense of inevitability. This is no longer simply a fight between two opponents. It is the final collision between two opposing ideas of power. Maximus fights with everything he has left. Every movement requires effort. Every strike carries the weight of his injuries. He is not the unstoppable commander from the beginning of the film. He is a wounded man refusing to let injustice define the ending of his story. Commodus, despite having physical advantages, fights from fear. He wants victory because he needs proof that he deserves his position. Maximus fights because he has already accepted death. That difference gives him strength. The duel becomes a final expression of their personalities. Commodus seeks control. Maximus seeks release. One man is terrified of losing power. The other has already lost everything important to him. In the end, Maximus defeats the emperor, but his victory comes at the ultimate price. He does not survive to rebuild Rome or enjoy the freedom he helped create. His journey has always been about returning home, and the film gives him that peace in a way the living world never could. As his life fades, Maximus sees the image that has followed him from the beginning, the wheat fields of his home. The same vision that represented peace and memory now becomes a doorway to reunion. He walks toward his family, leaving behind the suffering of the physical world. His final moments transform his story from revenge into something more meaningful. Maximus does not win because he destroys Commodus. He wins because Commodus fails to take away the one thing that mattered most, his sense of honor. After his death, Juba fulfills a promise by burying the small figurines of Maximus's wife and son in the Colosseum sand. The arena that witnessed so much death becomes the resting place of memories connected to love and family. The empire may continue, and Rome's future remains uncertain, but Maximus has achieved what he wanted from the beginning. He has found his way home. The warrior who entered the arena as a broken man leaves it as a legend, not because he conquered Rome, but because he reminded Rome what true greatness looked like. Maximus Decimus Meridius stands apart from many traditional action heroes because his journey is not built around ambition. He does not dream of becoming emperor. He does not seek fame, wealth, or influence. He is not trying to prove that he deserves power. In fact, the tragedy of his character comes from the opposite desire. Maximus wants to leave power behind. At the beginning of Gladiator, he is already everything a conventional hero is expected to become. He is respected by soldiers, admired by leaders, and feared by enemies. He has achieved the status that many characters spend entire films chasing. Yet none of it matters to him. His greatest wish is not another victory on the battlefield. It is returning home to his family and living a simple life away from the endless demands of Rome. This immediately separates him from the traditional action protagonist. Maximus is not driven by the hunger to gain something. He is driven by the pain of losing something. His story is not about becoming a hero. He was already one. His journey is about surviving after his entire identity has been destroyed. The film presents Maximus as a man trapped between two versions of himself. There is the general who commands armies with confidence and precision. There is the Spaniard, the gladiator created by the arena's violence and public fascination. And beneath both identities is the true Maximus, the exhausted man carrying unimaginable grief. This is what makes him an anti-hero of action cinema. He does not enjoy violence. He does not seek revenge because it excites him. Every fight is something forced upon him. The arena does not awaken a desire for battle, it reveals how much he has lost. His greatest conflict is not defeating enemies. It is preventing hatred from consuming the last remaining parts of himself. Maximus's strength comes from restraint. He feels anger, but he does not become controlled by it. He experiences unimaginable suffering, but he refuses to allow suffering to erase his humanity. In a genre often built around characters who become stronger through aggression, Maximus becomes powerful through endurance. This connection to Stoicism is one of the most important elements of his character. The philosophy associated with Marcus Aurelius, especially through writings such as Meditations, emphasized self-control, acceptance of hardship, and the responsibility to act with virtue regardless of circumstances. While Gladiator is not a direct adaptation of Marcus Aurelius's philosophy, the influence is reflected in the way Maximus approaches suffering. He cannot control what has happened to him. He cannot bring back his family. He cannot undo Commodus's betrayal. But he can control how he responds. That is where his dignity comes from. Maximus does not pretend that pain does not exist. His stoicism is not emotional emptiness. It is the decision to carry pain without allowing it to define his actions. He grieves deeply, but he continues moving forward because surrendering completely would mean losing the connection to the people he loved. Russell Crowe's performance captures this contradiction through physical and emotional restraint. Much of Maximus's character exists beneath the surface. He is not constantly expressing his suffering through dramatic speeches. Instead, Crowe allows small details to reveal the weight he carries. His eyes often communicate what his words refuse to say. There is exhaustion behind his stare, a sense that part of him is still standing in the fields of Hispania, remembering the life that disappeared. Even when he appears powerful, there is a sadness that never leaves him. This is why Maximus feels different from many cinematic warriors. He is physically intimidating, but emotionally fragile. He can defeat opponents in combat, yet he remains vulnerable to memories of his family. His greatest weakness and his greatest strength come from the same place: he still cares. The contrast between his identities creates the emotional foundation of the film. General Maximus represents duty and leadership. The Spaniard represents survival and resistance. The final version of Maximus is something different, a man who has moved beyond both roles and simply wants peace. The world keeps trying to turn him into a symbol. Rome sees a hero. The crowd sees an entertainer. Politicians see an opportunity. Commodus sees a threat. But Maximus never sees himself that way. He remains a husband and father searching for a way back to the people he lost. This is why his final victory feels so powerful. He does not win because he becomes more ruthless than his enemies. He wins because, even after experiencing the darkest parts of human existence, he refuses to become like them. Gladiator is not the story of a man discovering his strength. It is the story of a man protecting the part of himself that was already strong before the world tried to destroy it. The greatest villains are often not frightening because they lack humanity. They are frightening because their humanity has been twisted into something destructive. Commodus is not terrifying simply because he is cruel or ambitious. He is terrifying because beneath his desire for power is a deep emotional emptiness that can never be satisfied. Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal transforms Commodus from a typical historical villain into a portrait of insecurity, desperation, and psychological collapse. He is not a character who believes he is evil. In his own mind, he is someone who has been denied what he deserves. The tragedy is that this sense of victimhood becomes the justification for his cruelty. At the center of Commodus's identity is his relationship with his father, Marcus Aurelius. Their final conversation reveals the wound that defines him. When Marcus explains that he does not believe Commodus possesses the qualities necessary to lead Rome, the rejection cuts deeper than any political insult. For Commodus, the issue is not simply losing the throne. It is losing the possibility of finally receiving his father's approval. His entire life appears to have been shaped by the belief that if he achieved enough, his father would eventually see him as worthy. But Marcus values qualities that Commodus cannot easily possess: wisdom, humility, and responsibility. The qualities Commodus wants to display are not the same qualities Marcus respects. This creates the emotional foundation of his downfall. The painful irony is that Commodus is surrounded by everything most people desire. He is the son of an emperor. He has wealth, status, and access to unlimited resources. Yet emotionally, he feels powerless. The one thing he wants most, the love and respect of his father, cannot be purchased or demanded. When that love becomes impossible, he replaces the desire for affection with the desire for control. His rise to power is therefore built on a contradiction. Commodus becomes emperor, but becoming emperor does not heal his insecurity. It only gives him more tools to hide it. This is why his relationship with the people of Rome becomes so important. Commodus does not simply want obedience from the citizens. He wants their admiration. He creates games, public celebrations, and displays of generosity because he believes the love of the crowd can fill the emotional absence left by his father's rejection. But this admiration is artificial. The people cheer because they are entertained. They celebrate because they are given spectacle. Commodus mistakes popularity for respect, but the difference between the two is exactly what he fails to understand. True respect must be earned. Maximus has it because soldiers follow him even when he has nothing to offer them. Commodus does not have it, so he must constantly create situations where people are forced to praise him. This insecurity also shapes his relationship with Lucilla. His attachment to his sister is disturbing because it reveals how isolated he has become. Commodus does not view relationships through trust and mutual respect. He sees them through possession. He wants to control the few people whose approval still matters to him. The uncomfortable tension surrounding Lucilla reflects a deeper psychological problem. Commodus is unable to separate love from ownership. His need for connection has become so distorted that affection becomes another form of power. Lucilla represents a connection to the family and approval he lost, but instead of accepting her as an independent person, he tries to dominate her. His obsession reveals not strength, but emotional weakness. He is a man surrounded by people yet unable to form genuine bonds with any of them. This makes him the perfect opposite of Maximus. On the surface, their situations appear completely different. Commodus is the emperor. Maximus is a slave. Commodus commands armies. Maximus is forced to fight for entertainment. Yet the deeper truth is the reverse. Commodus possesses absolute political power but has no inner freedom. He is controlled by his fears, his insecurities, and his endless need for validation. Every action he takes is a reaction to what others think of him. Maximus, despite losing his status and freedom, maintains control over his own identity. His body may belong to others, but his values remain his own. This contrast is what makes their conflict more meaningful than a simple hero versus villain story. Commodus is not defeated only because he is physically weaker. He is defeated because he has spent his entire life trying to become powerful while sacrificing the very qualities that make someone worthy of power. Maximus loses everything and remains himself. Commodus gains everything and loses himself. That is the tragedy at the heart of his character. The emperor who controls an empire is ultimately controlled by his own emptiness. And the slave who appears powerless becomes the one person Commodus can never truly defeat. A story as large as Gladiator could easily become overwhelmed by its scale. Ancient Rome, massive battles, political conflicts, and arena spectacles create a world filled with countless possibilities. Yet the film remains emotionally grounded because of the characters surrounding Maximus. Each member of the supporting cast reflects a different response to power, suffering, and survival. They are not simply characters who assist the hero's journey. They represent different ways of navigating a world where morality is constantly tested. Lucilla exists at the center of the most dangerous environment in Rome, the imperial court. As the daughter of Marcus Aurelius and sister of Commodus, she is connected to both the old vision of Rome and the corruption threatening to replace it. Her position gives her influence, but it also places her in constant danger. Connie Nielsen portrays Lucilla as someone forced to live between responsibility and fear. She understands her brother's instability, but she cannot openly challenge him without risking everything. Every conversation inside the palace becomes a calculation. Every expression must be controlled. A wrong word can become a political weapon. Her greatest motivation is not personal power. It is protecting her son, Lucius. This relationship reveals another side of Lucilla's character. She is not simply a political figure caught between powerful men. She is a mother trying to protect a child from a world where ambition destroys families. Her concern for Lucius mirrors the family Maximus lost, creating an emotional connection between them. Lucilla's struggle is therefore a battle of survival. She must navigate the expectations of imperial life while secretly resisting the person who controls it. Unlike Maximus, she cannot openly fight. Her battlefield is the palace, and her weapons are patience, intelligence, and careful choices. Proximo represents a completely different response to Rome's brutality. When Maximus meets him, Proximo appears to be someone who has accepted the system rather than fought against it. He profits from the same arena that destroyed countless lives. He understands that violence is a business, and he has learned how to survive by adapting to it. But Oliver Reed's performance reveals that Proximo is not simply cynical. Beneath his harsh exterior is a man who remembers what it felt like to be powerless. As a former gladiator, he understands the humiliation and danger of the arena better than anyone. His philosophy is practical because he has learned the world rarely rewards idealism. He tells Maximus to understand the crowd because he knows survival requires more than strength. It requires strategy. Yet Maximus changes him. Through Maximus, Proximo reconnects with a sense of purpose he had buried. He begins seeing the arena not just as a place where men die, but as a place where someone can challenge the forces controlling them. Helping Maximus becomes a way for Proximo to recover the dignity he lost long ago. His final actions reveal that beneath years of compromise, his humanity was never completely gone. Juba serves as the emotional and spiritual counterpart to Maximus. While Maximus is consumed by memories of the past, Juba represents acceptance of the future. He understands suffering, but he refuses to allow suffering to define existence. Their friendship works because they balance each other. Maximus provides strength and determination. Juba provides perspective and hope. In a world where men are constantly reduced to weapons, Juba reminds Maximus that they are still human beings. Their shared belief in an afterlife becomes one of the film's quietest but most powerful ideas. For Maximus, the hope of seeing his family again is what keeps him moving forward. It gives meaning to his suffering and allows him to imagine peace beyond the violence surrounding him. Juba does not promise that the world will become fair. He offers something more valuable, the belief that the soul can remain untouched even when the body suffers. Senator Gracchus represents another form of resistance. Unlike Maximus, who fights through physical courage, Gracchus fights through politics. He understands that Rome's future depends not only on defeating Commodus but on preserving the idea that Rome belongs to more than one man. However, Gracchus is not portrayed as a simple idealist. He understands compromise. He understands that political survival often requires difficult decisions. His approach reflects the complicated reality of maintaining freedom inside a system built around imperial authority. The fragile hope he represents is not a guaranteed victory. It is the belief that principles can survive even when the people defending them are threatened. Together, these characters create a fuller picture of Gladiator's world. Maximus represents honor under suffering. Commodus represents power corrupted by insecurity. Lucilla represents courage hidden behind caution. Proximo represents redemption through action. Juba represents faith beyond pain. Gracchus represents resistance through conviction. Each character reveals a different answer to the same question: what remains of a person when the world tries to take everything away? The answer is what gives Gladiator its emotional strength. The empire may be built on violence and control, but these characters prove that identity, loyalty, and dignity cannot be easily conquered. Beneath the battles, political conspiracies, and spectacle of the arena, Gladiator is ultimately a film about ideas. The ancient world it presents may be filled with emperors and armies, but the questions it asks are surprisingly modern. What gives a person value? Does power create greatness or reveal the absence of it? And when society becomes obsessed with entertainment, who is truly in control? At the center of the film is the conflict between honor and corruption. Maximus represents a form of leadership built on responsibility. His authority comes from service, not ownership. He commands soldiers because they trust him, not because they fear him. Even after losing everything, he continues to follow a personal code that exists beyond rewards or recognition. Commodus represents the opposite. His power is inherited rather than earned, and because he knows this, he constantly tries to prove himself. He replaces respect with fear and genuine loyalty with public performance. His empire is built on the appearance of strength because he lacks the inner confidence that creates true authority. Their conflict reflects a larger question about leadership. Is power something a person uses to serve others, or something they use to satisfy themselves? Gladiator presents the fall of Rome not as a simple military failure, but as a moral one. The empire is powerful, wealthy, and capable of extraordinary achievements, yet it is vulnerable because the values holding it together have weakened. The problem is not that Rome lacks strength. The problem is that strength has become disconnected from purpose. This leads to one of the film's most important ideas, the illusion of empire. Rome appears eternal. Its buildings are massive, its armies are unstoppable, and its rulers seem almost godlike. But Gladiator constantly reminds the audience that every empire is temporary. Behind the marble architecture and political ceremonies are ordinary human weaknesses, insecurity, greed, fear, and the desire for control. Commodus understands the appearance of power better than anyone. He knows how to create a performance of greatness. He builds monuments, organizes games, and presents himself as a ruler loved by the people. But the film reveals that this image is fragile because it depends entirely on external approval. The Colosseum becomes the perfect symbol of this illusion. It represents Rome's engineering brilliance and cultural influence, but it also represents the darker side of civilization. Thousands gather to watch suffering become entertainment. Violence becomes a public celebration. This creates Gladiator's most fascinating self-critique. The film asks the audience to examine their own relationship with spectacle. Inside the story, the Roman crowd demands bigger fights, louder victories, and more dramatic deaths. They are entertained by human suffering because the arena transforms tragedy into a performance. But the audience watching Gladiator is also drawn to the same spectacle. We watch the battles. We feel excitement during the combat scenes. We cheer when Maximus defeats his enemies. The film does not accuse viewers of being the same as the Roman mob, but it creates an uncomfortable mirror. It asks why audiences are fascinated by violence when it is presented as entertainment. The question is not whether spectacle is wrong, but whether we understand the cost behind it. This is what makes Gladiator more thoughtful than a simple action film. It uses the very language of blockbuster entertainment to question our desire for it. Another central theme is the meaning of a life well lived. The phrase, "What we do in life echoes in eternity," becomes more than a memorable line. It represents Maximus's entire philosophy. For him, legacy is not about statues, titles, or political achievements. It is about the impact a person leaves through their choices. A good life is measured by loyalty, love, and integrity rather than recognition. This idea separates Maximus from Commodus. Commodus wants to be remembered because he fears being forgotten. Maximus becomes unforgettable because he never seeks fame. One man chases eternity through power. The other achieves it through character. The final thematic conflict is between republic and tyranny. Gladiator presents the fall of Rome as the result of one person gaining too much control. When power becomes concentrated in the hands of someone who cannot handle it, the entire society becomes vulnerable. Marcus Aurelius's dream of restoring the Republic represents the belief that Rome should belong to its people rather than one ruler's ego. Commodus's reign represents the opposite, a world where the desires of one man determine the fate of millions. Yet the film does not suggest that political systems alone create freedom. It argues that freedom depends on the values of the people who hold power. Gladiator's lasting impact comes from the fact that its themes are not trapped in ancient history. Empires rise and fall. Leaders gain and lose influence. Societies continue to debate the balance between security, freedom, and control. The Roman armor may belong to the past, but the questions underneath it remain timeless. The film's greatest battle is not fought with swords. It is fought between the values that preserve humanity and the desires that destroy it. One of Gladiator's greatest strengths is that it often communicates through images before words. Ridley Scott builds a visual language where landscapes, colors, textures, and small physical details reveal the emotional state of the characters. The film is not only showing ancient Rome, it is constantly contrasting different ideas of existence. Throughout the story, the conflict between nature and civilization appears again and again. Dirt and marble become opposing symbols. Dirt represents humanity, mortality, and connection to the real world. Marble represents power, wealth, and the artificial image created by empire. This contrast is introduced immediately in Germania. The battlefield is not clean or heroic. It is cold, wet, and covered in mud. Soldiers struggle through the earth beneath them, reminding the audience that even the greatest empire is built upon human bodies and sacrifice. The physical environment rejects the idea of war as glorious. Instead, it presents war as something heavy, exhausting, and deeply connected to death. Against this harsh landscape, Maximus performs one of the film's most meaningful rituals. Before battle, he takes dirt from the ground and rubs it into his hands. The action appears simple, but it reveals a great deal about his character. The dirt connects him to the earth beneath him. It reminds him that beneath the armor and the title of general, he is still a human being. The ritual creates a connection between the battlefield and the peaceful agricultural life he dreams of returning to. Maximus is a warrior, but his identity is not rooted in violence. His true desire is connected to the land he hopes to return to. The gesture also reflects humility. While Rome's leaders surround themselves with marble, gold, and symbols of superiority, Maximus chooses something ordinary. Dirt cannot be owned or controlled. It belongs to everyone. This connection between humanity and the earth continues throughout the film. Maximus repeatedly finds himself separated from the natural world he loves, moving through environments controlled by others. The further he travels from home, the more distant he becomes from the life he wanted. The film's color design reinforces this emotional journey. Germania is dominated by cold blues, gray skies, smoke, and muted tones. The environment feels almost lifeless. It reflects a world of conflict where survival has replaced peace. The cold atmosphere mirrors Maximus's emotional state as a soldier trapped in endless war. Zuckerbar introduces a different visual identity. The landscape becomes warmer, filled with sunlight and earth tones. Yet this warmth does not represent happiness. Instead, it creates a contrast between physical beauty and human suffering. The world may be brighter, but Maximus is still imprisoned. Rome presents perhaps the most complicated visual contrast. The city is filled with gold, white marble, and overwhelming grandeur. It represents civilization at its highest achievement, but the beauty also feels suffocating. The bright surfaces hide corruption beneath them. The empire appears perfect from a distance, but inside its walls are fear, manipulation, and violence. The visual perfection becomes almost a disguise. This is especially clear in the contrast between Maximus and Commodus. Commodus surrounds himself with symbols of power because he needs the world to believe he is powerful. Maximus carries his strength internally. He does not need marble halls or royal clothing to prove who he is. The film also repeatedly returns to images of hands, creating a subtle visual connection between memory, identity, and mortality. Maximus's hands touch dirt before battle. They hold the objects connected to his family. They carry the physical evidence of his suffering. These repeated images remind the audience that his journey is not only about what he sees but what he carries with him. The small wooden figurines representing his wife and son become one of the most important symbols in the film. They are not valuable objects in a material sense. They contain no political power or financial worth. Their importance comes entirely from emotional meaning. For Maximus, they represent home. While Rome builds enormous monuments designed to survive through history, these small wooden figures represent a much more personal form of legacy. They symbolize family, love, and the simple life that existed before everything was taken away. They also connect to the film's spiritual ideas. The figurines become a bridge between the world Maximus is trapped in and the peaceful existence he hopes to reach. They represent the belief that memory can survive even when physical things are destroyed. The final imagery of the wheat fields completes this visual journey. The same natural world introduced at the beginning returns as a symbol of peace and reunion. After moving through battlefields, arenas, and imperial halls, Maximus finally reaches the place he has been searching for from the beginning. Gladiator's visual storytelling works because every image carries emotional meaning. The dirt, the marble, the colors, and the small objects are not just elements of production design. They represent the struggle between power and humanity, between the world people build and the simple things that give life meaning. Beneath its historical setting and epic scale, Gladiator is a film deeply concerned with philosophical questions. It uses ancient Rome as a stage to explore ideas that extend far beyond the empire itself: how people should respond to suffering, what makes a leader worthy of power, and whether a meaningful life is measured by achievement or by character. A major influence on the film's worldview comes from Roman Stoicism, particularly through the figure of Marcus Aurelius. Historically, Marcus Aurelius was known not only as an emperor but also as a philosopher whose writings and meditations explored discipline, responsibility, and the importance of controlling one's own actions rather than being consumed by external circumstances. The film's version of Marcus Aurelius reflects these ideas. He is portrayed as a ruler who has gained everything the world can offer but has become aware of the limitations of power. His concern is not simply maintaining Rome's dominance. It is preserving the values that he believes made Rome meaningful. His exhaustion comes from understanding a painful truth: an empire can be powerful and still lose its soul. Through Marcus, Gladiator presents leadership as a moral responsibility rather than a privilege. The emperor is not great because he sits above others. He is great because he recognizes his duty toward them. This philosophy directly contrasts with Commodus, whose understanding of leadership is based on personal desire and emotional validation. For Commodus, power exists to serve himself. For Marcus, power exists to serve something greater. Maximus inherits this philosophical conflict. Although he is not a philosopher like Marcus Aurelius, his actions reflect many Stoic principles. He accepts suffering without allowing it to destroy his sense of duty. He cannot control the tragedies that happen to him, but he can control the person he chooses to become afterward. This is what makes his journey emotionally powerful. Gladiator does not present strength as the absence of pain. It presents strength as the ability to carry pain while still protecting one's values. The film's exploration of death continues this philosophical conversation. Throughout the story, death is not presented only as an ending. For Maximus, death represents the possibility of reunion and peace. The recurring image of the Elysian fields transforms the idea of mortality into something comforting. Maximus does not fear death in the same way Commodus does because he believes there is something beyond the physical world. His greatest desire is not survival at any cost. It is returning to the people he lost. This creates another powerful contrast between the two characters. Commodus has every reason to fear death because his entire identity depends on earthly recognition. He wants statues, applause, and historical importance because he cannot imagine meaning beyond what others give him. Maximus, however, finds freedom because he accepts that life is temporary. His legacy comes not from controlling how others remember him but from living according to his principles. The Elysian fields therefore represent more than an afterlife. They represent emotional release. They are the place where Maximus can finally stop fighting. The film also carries broader political ideas about power and society. Released at the beginning of the 21st century, Gladiator arrived during a period when audiences were increasingly examining questions about leadership, military power, and the relationship between authority and freedom. The story creates a symbolic tension between those who use force to gain control and those who view strength as a responsibility. Maximus is a military figure, but he is not driven by conquest. His skills as a soldier exist alongside his desire for peace. This distinction separates him from leaders who use military power to expand personal influence. The film also explores the danger of populism and manufactured popularity. Commodus understands that controlling public emotion can be just as powerful as controlling armies. He uses entertainment and spectacle to create the appearance of legitimacy, presenting himself as a ruler connected to ordinary people while concentrating power around himself. The Colosseum becomes a symbol of this relationship between politics and entertainment. The crowd's approval can strengthen a ruler, but it can also reveal how easily public attention can be manipulated. At the same time, Gladiator does not suggest that ordinary people are powerless. The crowd's changing loyalty shows that public opinion can become a force capable of challenging authority. The same audience that celebrates violence can also recognize courage and truth when they witness it. Ultimately, the film's deeper meaning comes from its understanding of freedom. Maximus begins the story as a powerful general and ends it as a dying man, yet his internal freedom remains intact throughout. Commodus begins as a prince with every advantage and ends as a ruler completely trapped by his own fears. The film's final message is not that power is meaningless. It is that power without virtue becomes a prison. An empire can command armies, build monuments, and control millions of lives. But the measure of a person's existence is found in something far more lasting, the choices they make when everything else is taken away. When audiences think about Gladiator's visual achievement, they often remember the massive armies, the endless crowds of the Colosseum, and the scale of ancient Rome brought back to life. But the film's visual power does not come from computer-generated imagery alone. In fact, one of the reasons Gladiator still feels convincing decades later is because Ridley Scott approached visual effects as an extension of reality rather than a replacement for it. The filmmakers understood that ancient Rome could not simply be created through digital images. The world needed physical weight. Actors needed real spaces to move through, real surfaces to touch, and real environments that could influence their performances. This philosophy shaped the production design in Malta, where the filmmakers constructed large sections of ancient Rome. One of the most ambitious achievements was the creation of a massive replica of the Colosseum. Instead of attempting to build the entire structure, the production constructed a practical section approximately 52 feet high, representing a portion of the iconic arena. This physical set became the foundation for the visual effects team. The actors could stand inside the environment, look up at actual architecture, and feel the scale of the place around them. The practical construction provided something digital effects often struggle to create: authenticity. The audience does not believe in the Colosseum because of its size alone. They believe in it because the characters appear to exist within a real world. However, the production also faced the challenge of showing Rome at a scale impossible to achieve through physical construction alone. The Colosseum was not just a building. It was a living environment filled with tens of thousands of spectators. Creating that level of detail required a combination of traditional filmmaking and emerging digital techniques. The visual effects team at the mill expanded the practical sets through CGI crowd replication and digital extensions. Instead of building thousands of extras or constructing an entire arena, the filmmakers photographed real groups of people and used digital methods to multiply them across the stadium. This approach was still developing at the time. Modern audiences are accustomed to fully digital environments and massive computer-generated worlds, but Gladiator arrived during a period when filmmakers were discovering how to blend practical and digital elements convincingly. The key was balance. The physical sets gave the images texture and realism. The digital enhancements created scale. Together, they allowed the film to achieve something that neither method could accomplish alone. The same philosophy extended to the film's action sequences. Gladiator's battles have a distinct visual rhythm that separates them from traditional sword fights. Ridley Scott and cinematographer John Matheson experimented with camera techniques that created a sharp, fragmented sense of movement. One notable technique involved adjusting the camera's shutter angle during combat scenes, producing a staccato visual effect where motion appeared more abrupt and intense. Instead of smooth cinematic movement, the battles felt chaotic and immediate, almost as if the audience was experiencing the violence from inside the confusion. This style gave the Germanic battle and arena sequences a physical intensity that influenced many later action productions. Films such as 300 and television series like Spartacus would later adopt similar approaches to create heightened, graphic combat imagery. But Gladiator's technical achievements were not limited to large-scale battles. One of its most challenging visual effects accomplishments came from an unexpected tragedy during production. The death of Oliver Reed, who played Proximo, created a difficult situation for the filmmakers. Reed had completed much of his performance, but important scenes remained unfinished. The production faced the challenge of honoring the actor's work while completing the character's storyline. Rather than simply replacing Reed, the filmmakers used a combination of existing footage, careful editing, lighting techniques, and digital effects. A computer-generated face was integrated into certain shots, allowing Proximo's final moments to remain connected to Reed's original performance. At the time, this represented a significant achievement in digital filmmaking. The goal was not to create a perfect digital replacement of the actor. It was to preserve the emotional continuity of the character and allow Reed's contribution to remain part of the finished film. This approach reflected Gladiator's larger visual philosophy. Technology was never the main attraction. It existed to support storytelling. The film's effects work succeeded because audiences were not focused on the technology itself. They were focused on the world being created. The digital crowds, extended landscapes, and visual enhancements disappeared into the experience because they served the emotional reality of the story. Gladiator arrived at a turning point in filmmaking, when practical craftsmanship and digital innovation were beginning to merge. It proved that computer-generated imagery could enhance historical realism rather than replace it. The result was a film that looked ancient but was created with techniques that helped define the future of blockbuster cinema. Its greatest visual achievement was not simply rebuilding Rome. It was convincing audiences that Rome had returned. Ridley Scott's approach to Gladiator was shaped by a career built around visual precision. Before becoming one of Hollywood's most recognized filmmakers, Scott developed a background in commercial art and visual design, an experience that influenced the way he approached filmmaking. He did not begin with dialogue or performance alone. He began with images. For Scott, cinema has always been a visual language. This philosophy became essential on a production as massive as Gladiator. A historical epic contains thousands of moving parts, armies, architecture, costumes, lighting, camera movement, and visual effects. Without careful planning, a film of this scale can quickly become uncontrolled. Scott's solution was to visualize almost every major element before cameras started rolling. These detailed hand-drawn storyboards, often referred to as Ridleygrams, became a defining part of his filmmaking process. They allowed Scott to map out shots, camera positions, character movements, and visual compositions long before production began. The value of this preparation was not only artistic but practical. Large-scale filmmaking is extremely expensive, and every additional day on set can dramatically increase costs. By knowing how he wanted scenes to look, Scott could make decisions more efficiently and avoid unnecessary shooting. But the purpose of his storyboards was not to eliminate creativity. They created a foundation that allowed creativity to happen within controlled boundaries. This balance between preparation and spontaneity is one of the reasons Gladiator feels both carefully designed and emotionally alive. The opening battle in Germania demonstrates Scott's ability to manage overwhelming scale. A scene involving thousands of soldiers, explosions, horses, fire, and shifting battle lines could easily become confusing. Instead, Scott creates a clear visual experience by focusing on specific human details within the larger chaos. The audience does not experience the battle only as a historical event. They experience it through Maximus's perspective. A soldier falling. A weapon moving through smoke. A moment of silence before violence begins. Scott understands that spectacle only matters when the audience understands the people inside it. This approach continued throughout the arena sequences. Rather than relying on one camera angle to capture a planned performance, Scott often used multiple cameras simultaneously, sometimes 4 to 6 cameras during major action scenes. This allowed him to capture different perspectives and preserve moments of unexpected intensity.